a recorded thing.
If
When I put it out, it
Chris-
doesn't sync correctly. My words and the sound and the whatever were not right.
here, I got you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. You guys, I'm a little off my game, and I have to be honest about it, because I was going to show you the fabulous recording that I had done back in April. I watched it. It was great. It was fabulous. And then I tried to edit it so that it took out the details of whatever was happening that day in April. And instead, I somehow managed to make it so that my speech was about 30 seconds behind what was happening in the video. So I knew that would not work for today's class. And so instead, once I discovered that 5 minutes ago, I ran downstairs and we are doing this live. So as of this moment, it is 1:03 in the afternoon, and we are about to do our Watermark University podcasting class. So I hope that you enjoy it. So I believe there are about 6 of you who might be watching right now. If there's extras, feel free to watch this, or feel free to request that I send you the link later. That's another option. I can send you the link later, and can make sure that you get the handout as well. So either one of those options is available to you. How you can send me a message, you can do it in LifeLoop. You can just call the concierge and let them know that you'd like that this class sent to you as well. But let's go ahead and get started for everybody who has their handout. So Watermark University podcasts, they're not just a radio show. So let me tell you a little bit about my history with podcasts. Podcasts have been around a long time. So essentially they were created kind of accidentally because it was casting music to an iPod. And I'm sure many of you bought iPods for your grandkids. Maybe you even had one yourself. They've been around for about 20 years, believe it or not. Even longer, maybe 25. But anyway, the podcast the original idea was just playing music that would go to your iPod, which is how they got their name. And then they've sort of evolved over time, and there are all kinds of different sort of podcasts. Podcasts are not regulated by the FCC. So anybody can make a podcast and can publish it and put it up on the internet for the world to consume, which is amazing. But it is also a little bit difficult sometimes, because that means you can't always control the quality. So when you are looking through podcasts, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as well, you may say, oh, that subject sounds so interesting. Click on it, listen to it, and it's scratchy and it's bad and you can't really hear it very well. And it's because somebody just made it in their, in their house, and they were attempting to make a podcast. But on the other hand, podcasts are now made by every single reputable news source. They are made by large studios. Many actors, many comedians, musicians all do their own podcast. It's a way to get the news right out to the people. And then a lot of people who may not have their own podcast are often guests on other podcasts or the subject of podcasts. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later as well. So let's first talk about how we get to listen to them. Oh, wait, I was going to tell you about my history. So I didn't really listen to podcasts. I thought they were more for people who had long commutes, or it really was that, listen to people who had long commutes, or when they were exercising or something like this. I didn't really listen to them. I would listen to podcasts. I had a few favorites, and I would kind of catch up with them when I was maybe on a long flight, or that was really it. And then a few years ago, I started listening to them more often. So I will often listen to a podcast. In the morning, I like to listen to the news, but on my way home from work, I will usually put on a podcast. And even if I only hear 15 minutes of it at a time, over a couple of days, I'll get through the whole thing. I also will put them on while I do the dishes, because then it makes that time go by a little bit faster, at least to me. So if you ever have any tasks like that, or if you enjoy doing some sort of a craft, or, you are a knitter, you are a whittler, you are, anything like that. It's nice sometimes to have something. I mean, music is great, but sometimes it's fun to listen to other things. And it can be sort of an improvised discussion, all the way to kind of that idea of an old-fashioned radio show where they're very, very produced. So let's talk about how you get them. So many podcasts, there's a couple ways to do it. So as I put in the handout, you can access them on a website. You could go to Google and you could decide that you want to look up all of the NPR podcasts, or all of the Fox News podcasts, or all of the podcasts. You just put in the word podcast and then a subject that you're interested in. And many podcasts will have their own websites that have maybe a player inside of that website. So that is one option available to you. But more commonly, what people do is they use their telephones. So on your phone, I have a Google phone. I know most people I've noticed in this building have iPhones, which is fine, which is great. So on your iPhone or your iPad, this is the icon you're looking for. This is their podcast app. Okay. And it comes standard with every single device. Now, if you maybe accidentally deleted it, or, whatever kiddo set up your iPhone or iPad deleted it, you can easily go to the iTunes store and put in the word podcast. And that, again, this little purple icon that's on your handout is the one that's going to come up. And there are many podcast apps to listen to them. Think of it like as a player. But for our purposes, we're going to go with the standard that a lot of people use, and the iTunes store really is the way that a lot of people use it. So when you have a podcast, you can open the podcast app, and I'll wait if you want to do it with me. I don't know how many people are going to be interactive at this stage, but you can open that podcast app and you will see a search bar, just like in a variety of things. The other thing you will see is often the top 10 podcasts for the week. Now, there's some that just stay in the same place, and some of them are by like there's one from Joe Rogan, who's a comedian, that's usually always in the top. There's some other comedians that are usually always in the top. And I don't know that those are going to be the ones that are going to interest our audiences here quite as much. They're a little more focused on the pop culture of today, but there's plenty of podcasts. So, but I do think it is interesting sometimes to see what that leaderboard says, because there may be a new one that was just released. That's a series, and you may want to catch up with it. So, but you can open the search box and you can put in anything you want. And I think the example that we used back in April that I'm going to say that we should use again, because it was such a good podcast, and I encourage anybody who is interested to listen to it. It's called Dolly Parton's America. And Dolly Parton's America is just one podcast. I think it's 7 episodes, and it's produced by the same people who produce a bunch of really great NPR entertainment type shows. And so it's a really high quality, and Dolly Parton was involved in the creation of it. And so it has an interesting journalistic eye on her life. So you could search that, and then you go to those search results. And on the homepage, you'll see the recent episodes, and you can tap one to play it. And if you like what you hear, you can click the subscribe button, and then it will automatically come into that purple app that with the podcast, and then you'll know when a new one is released. So I'm going to give you an example here. So I am going to search Dolly Parton's America. It popped right up for me because it was a very famous podcast. And then you can see there's different episodes. You can click on the podcast itself, and it tells you about the podcast. As I said before, you can click subscribe. And that's what all the podcasters at the end of their episode, they're going to say, click subscribe to help us, because then that's what moves their rankings up higher. But you can listen to these. And often, unfortunately, when you look at them, they'll list the most recent episode first. And you may want to go back to the first episode. So you may need to scroll down. Sometimes you can look at the date, the release date, and it will tell you what you want to listen to. But often these, like on this one, there's a little arrow and I can click that I want to see the oldest first. And then I know I can follow through. But when the next one, when one ends, the next one will start. But yeah, it's pretty fun. So that is, if you have an Android phone, which is what I have, it's the same idea, but the icon looks a little different. So again, that's if you have an Android. If you have an Apple phone, ignore this part. Okay. And then we can turn over to the other side. It's really the same rules, but I walked everybody through it step by step. So if you follow these steps, you should be able to figure something out. Okay. And if you have trouble, come down and we'll help you. So let's talk about some popular podcast recommendations. So I know there are a lot of history buffs in this building. I know that there are quite a few people who enjoy astronomy as well. And both of those things have some really interesting podcasts. I gave you some examples of some podcasts that you could search yourself. And so these are just a few. I mean, these are literally, I had half a page and I said, okay, well, I will give some greatest hits. But this is by no means even the scratching the surface of all of the fabulous options that are out there. But in history, there's a really fun one called Ridiculous History. There's another one called Stuff You Missed in History Class. There's a newer one that I had just heard about back then called Dressed, the History of Fashion. And then there are other ones called like this Hardcore History. That one is multi-hours long. So they dive deep into certain subjects. And I know that there's some folks who would probably really enjoy that, where they have experts on all kinds of different things. I can't remember. Let's see, if we look up Hardcore History, we can see what their most recent episode was. And it was probably on Hardcore. Here we go. Hardcore History. Yeah. So these episodes are up to 4 hours long. So they're not to be consumed in one seating. They're sort of expecting that you will dive in and out. So, so really, really, really interesting stuff. But then just a few episodes ago, Tom Hanks joined him and they were talking about his new movie about the Second World War naval theme, Greyhound, which we showed here as well. So often you will have really famous people who tuck into these podcasts and have an informal discussion. And it's very different than when you see them on a television show, or a chat show where they're all dressed up. It's informal, and you sometimes learn a lot of really interesting things about your favorite actors and musicians or historians, or journalists even. If you're interested in news and investigative journalism, The Daily from the New York Times comes out, believe it or not, every day, and does a hardcore in-depth for one current event subject, which is refreshing. It goes a little deeper than the sound bites you might hear on the radio. Serial is another long-form journalism podcast, and there's been even spin-offs. So Serial is a spin-off of This American Life, which is a journalistic podcast that you might have also heard as a radio show. It started out as a radio show and then became a podcast. So they essentially take the episodes that are on the radio and then they put them on the podcast. But Serial came out a few years ago and was such a phenomenon that it took over, and there were even skits made about it on Saturday Night Live. It was such a big thing. And it did, I think it was like a 10 episode deep dive into a true crime story about whether or not a teenager had murdered his girlfriend. And they had the interviews with the teenager who'd been in jail for the last 15 years, the interviews with other people learning about it. It was fascinating. And it kept the nation wrapped, waiting for the next episode. And it's called Serial because, of course, it's like those old serial radio shows that I'm sure some of you listened to when you were kids. So it's really great. They even had a spinoff recently that I listened to that was about that was about education, and it was really interesting. And it talked about why there are disparities in education, and by following one single school in New York over the course of the century that it had been open. And it was really fascinating, and I learned a lot. And it's just they're just such incredibly talented people producing audio stories right now. So those are some examples from some news and investigative journalism. And again, when you look at those, if you open your podcast and you click on explore, like it gives you some options where it says, do you want news? Are you curious about the election, about culture, education, business, comedy, arts, technology, health or fitness? And then it gives you what the top podcasts are in those sections. And so you really have a lot of things to look through. One of the things that I don't list here is there are a lot of kids and family podcasts, and that's something that we listen to with my kids. There's a podcast we listen to a lot called Smash Boom Best, and essentially it's teaching children about debate. And so they will debate things like sharks versus dinosaurs, or maybe not sharks. What is it? There was sharks versus elephants or something. I can't remember, but it's they're always really pizza versus ice cream, or just all kinds of things. And then they have people come on and do they teach debate and how you award points in debate, and it's really fun. And my little kid, and they're small, my kids are little, and they love it, and they're learning about debate. So hopefully when they hit high school they'll have internalized some of those lessons. So okay, let's move on to culture. Freakonomics was a book that I'm sure a lot of you read. It's also a radio show, and it's also a podcast. And so Freakonomics Radio is a really interesting podcast talking about the science of everyday life. 99% Invisible is another one in that same vein, where you're learning about things you didn't know you needed to learn about, but once you learn about them, you can't forget them. Ear Hustle is a fascinating podcast. This one, I want to play you the preview for. Many podcasts have trailers, so you can listen to a couple minutes of it and get an idea of what you are going to be hearing. But Ear Hustle is a podcast that is created inside a prison. So this was let me find the preview episode. So this episode, where do I find it? They're all different episodes. And here we go. Ear Hustle Season 1.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Zach, and this is Podcast Junkie, a weekly bite-sized show that gives you a look into a new podcast each week. So, let's get into this week's podcast. Let's start off with a quick warning that they cover in Season 1. So, let's take a second to take a listen to Ear Hustle Season 1 promo, and then we'll come back and let you know what's in store.
So there are some blue language in this.
The following podcast contains language that may not be appropriate for all listeners.
I did not realize that I could be potentially facing life in prison.
I'm going to drag you through four corners of this cell.
It's like that. It's like, I don't want to be in prison, but I want to know what it's like to be in prison.
You really think people want to know what it's like in prison?
Hell yeah, of course.
We got all these TV shows, new programs like Prison Break,
Orange is the New Black, Locked Up. You won't let me
and you know all the shows.
But they all bullshit, though.
Why? Why are they bullshit? Is it
ain't none of them serving time?
They never did no real time.
Acting.
Yeah, prison ain't really like that. Nah, man, we just living life.
Like everybody else. I'm Earlonne Woods.
Earlonne is serving a 31-year-to-life sentence for attempted second-degree robbery, and he's the co-host and co-producer of Ear Hustle.
And that is Nigel Poor. She's a visual artist who works with incarcerated men here at San Quentin, and she's the co-producer and co-host of Ear Hustle. See, she brings a softer touch to the show.
Thanks, Antoine. That's Antoine Williams. He's serving a 15-year sentence for armed robbery with a gun enhancement, and he's the sound designer for Ear Hustle.
I believed I was going to die in prison.
She was happy to
be with me. We all work together inside of the media lab in San Quentin Prison where we produce Ear Hustle.
And it's all done inside the prison. I mean, the interviewing, editing, sound design by your boy.
And that's really cool, but it also is super challenging because we have limited hours we can work. We've got no internet access, and we can't even freaking talk to each other on the phone.
What? So that gives you just a little taste of the type of thing you'll be able to find. I mean, who thought you could actually hear from people who were currently incarcerated about what it's like to live in prison? Just really interesting stuff. I'll play you a little bit of one of my favorites in a second as well. And then, culture. Perhaps after you're done listening to what it's like to live in prison, you'll need something to calm you down. There are a bajillion, this is an official number, a bajillion meditation podcasts. So no matter what you're looking for, you will be able to find somebody guide you through a meditation. And frankly, I know that we've taught you how to find meditations, or that you can find them on YouTube from the ones you would watch in the mornings, but I sort of prefer them on a podcast because you can turn it on, set your phone down, and then truly close your eyes and feel like you are being led through it by someone who's talking to you. So again, so many fabulous guided meditations if that's the kind of thing you're into, and there's something for everybody. For entertainment, there's a lot of fun things here. Good Job Brain is a really fun, like a kind of a trivia show, game show. The Lux Radio Theater is producing radio shows like they used to in the old days. And so you can follow along and listen to those stories. Dolly Parton's America was one that I had shared with you that I just absolutely adored, that came out back in March. And I devoured it. I was waiting every single week when they would drop their new episode. So you must remember, this is a wonderful podcast about old movies. So they go through old Hollywood, the scandals, the things that nobody knew about, the behind the scenes, and it's just fascinating. And it's produced so lovingly. And each episode might be about a certain actor or actress or a certain film, and they go really deep into it. Another one that I really like is called My Favorite Murder. I don't know that it would be the favorite of anybody here. I'm not that interested in true crime per se, but the two women who host it are very funny. And so they make me laugh, and I could always use a good laugh. So you will also find that there's a lot of fun podcasts, or you'll find the voice that you enjoy. And then I did want to put the National Public Radio, if you listen to that on the weekend and you miss one of those shows, often they are also made into a podcast. And so you can catch it later. Of course, like you can catch Wait, Don't Tell Me, Invisibilia, Up First, Hidden Brain, Fresh Air. All of those are available on podcast. Usually the limitation will be that they may only show maybe shows that have been out for 2 or 3 weeks. So it's, and maybe they'll have some special ones that you can find from the archives, but if you heard something a long time ago, you might be able to find it. But, because those Fresh Air interviews are so great. Terry Gross is a really great interviewer. And so sometimes you can find old interviews with people, but usually it's more recent interviews. And then, there are thousands of podcasts. So I recommend, sometimes the first episode of a podcast that has a lot of episodes may not be the strongest one because people are getting the hang of what they're doing. So kind of in the same way that when a new TV show comes on, you may need to give it an episode or two to see what you like, or listen to it and then skip ahead, which you can do. Nobody sees. So you can be a skipper and skip through the ads if they have an ad. That's another great thing about them, is you can just skip through the commercials. That's podcasts. So hopefully that was helpful to you. That's always what we aim to do. If you've got questions, you can always come down and ask me, or any of our other Community Life members. I think a lot of those folks know how to use the podcast app and are comfortable with it. And I can even, if there's a subject you're interested in and you're having trouble finding a podcast for it, let me know, and I can see what I can find searching as well. All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me. Again, if you need the handout, or if you would like me to send you the link to this video and you can watch it again later today, or tonight or whenever you want to watch it, that's fine as well. Just let me know and I'm happy to send it. Okay. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.